Hey YouTube, welcome to the MigsMachine, where we talk about all things kind of Web3, crypto related. I'm Migs, and today I have a really exciting interview with Tieshun from Namebase. We're talking all things kind of like Handshake, Web 3.0, kind of where the future is heading, what kind of things to look out for, maybe some predictions. So if you're interested, hit a like, subscribe, maybe a comment, share. That'd be great, and I hope you enjoy. But we're here to talk about you and just kind of Namebase and I guess the evolution of things. I've been around for since the first Handython, right? So I guess like 8 months, something like
Mhm.
that. And I've seen like huge development, but then I've also seen videos of you talking about Handshake like in 2018, like and just getting people together. Um, so a couple questions I had, if you don't mind, and then just like elaborate whatever you think would be great.
Yeah.
But what's been your biggest surprise with Handshake as a whole? Like since you heard about what was coming, right, and you essentially you made some decisions, but what evolution has taken shape that maybe you didn't see or that's been really interesting to follow, like on the chain itself?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing to me is and I think this is kind of a common theme across blockchains is it's the blockchain assets themselves or the technologies themselves um are actually much less interesting to me than like the human based network that kind of forms around it somewhat like organically, it seems, I guess, just like based on the incentive structures. So something that's been really impressive to me is the fact that the Handshake community all kind of grew organically and formed. Like HandyCon, that's not something that we threw. That was something that Sky Include, Mike Michelini, he put that together,
Yeah.
and he just became a community member organically. I forget. I think he might have like listened to like one of the podcasts that I was on or something like that, and then he got him on board and then started like getting active in the community, and then throwing HandyCon, and then from HandyCon we got a lot of big like existing DNS players, like every domain registrar after that like reach out to me and like, oh, like what's the deal with this? And now we're seeing like Namecheap, they're selling Handshake names on their website, and it's only less than like 2 years after Handshake's mainnet launch. So this stuff all snowballed so quickly, in a way that was like very hard to predict, and that was very surprising because I would have expected we would need to do like a lot of like biz dev and a lot of like partnership work, a lot of promotion and whatnot. But instead of what's happening is that the growth is all happening organically, which is like pretty surprising to me.
Yeah, yeah, you touched on a lot of things that I've also noticed. First of all, I agree. It's pretty impressive how people it's not like Handshake doesn't have like a central marketing team that's pushing out a lot of agendas, right? So it's very open. People kind of plug into what they want to do. Mike's been I'm a big fan of Mike's videos and just kind of his constant persistence in pushing things along. And there's been a lot of other users like that. But the first thing you said, I've noticed as well, and I think that's the most interesting thing about Handshake for me. What got me so into it is that I can immediately see the real world like dynamic people reacting to it. When people finally understand what it is, they take different avenues for like how they want to see that play out. And so early on, so that you're seeing people kind of take ownership and making the auctions, making they're like the Discord's always blown up. So like just a lot of creative ideas. Agreed. It's okay. So I feel the same, especially when you look at other projects. Those communities have very like I guess like it seems like strict agendas, but this is much more open, and so it feels like you're constantly discovering new things, getting developed, and then it's fun. Okay, cool. And in terms of like since you're very close to the adoption stream of Handshake. I mean, at least my version of it, right? Namebase is the most by far the most like user friendly kind of bridge to the common person just wanting to maybe just get a name or learn about Web3, right? Whether it's within like the stack of Web3, 3.0. What have you seen the adoption like pocketed in certain areas geographically or in demographics? Like, has it been more abroad or in the United States? Where have you really seen it, and what has driven that? I guess if you had to pinpoint it.
Yeah, I would say we've seen adoption from all over the world, actually like right from day one. So like for example, there is a WeChat community. I think that had shut down after the China crypto ban. I think it moved to like Telegram or maybe Discord. But like literally from day one, there was a huge swath of Western users, and then also a huge swath of Eastern users. There are community members from Japan, there are community members from Africa, there are community members from Indonesia, like literally in like Europe, like all over the world. And that's been the case like since day one. So I think what's really interesting there is that I think it just is kind of like a testament to the fact that crypto is really worldwide. And these communities are all really worldwide. And I think that's actually something that's really interesting, because when you think about like a traditional company or traditional software product, it's actually very hard for them typically to be like worldwide from day one. Even just like accepting payments internationally, it's something that's like quite challenging. But the cool thing with crypto is that a lot of these communities are global from day one. And it just means like the scale of what this stuff can become is much, much greater. But I think it's also due to the fact that there's much lower friction for people to kind of come together and coalesce, because you can, submit a transaction in seconds, when normally if you want to like send a transaction from the US to China or Europe or wherever, it's going to take like a few days at least, and $40 in fees, which is completely unaffordable for a large portion of the world. So yeah, the community is all over.
Yeah, and that's just a testament to your point, like decentralization just taking place, right? The idea, I think, eliminating the friction really just it creates a whole different playing field in terms of access, which I'm going to ask you something about that in a little bit as well. Yeah, I mean, Handshake is primarily like a value chain, right? Where it's either transmitting an asset in terms of a name or in terms of a token. It doesn't have like a lot of governance built into it. But even without that being a portion of it, people can essentially, with the incentives, to your point, kind of decide how they want to interact. Well, cool, okay. More about, so Namebase specifically, I had just like questions. It's been a while that you've been running it. I know that I don't think it's your first company, but what there's so much going on crypto Twitter. I feel like I'll hear like news one day and I'm like, this could change the whole dynamic of this whole section of crypto. And that happens, Namebase isn't like tied to like the Ethereum, or Handshake isn't tied to the Ethereum network. Right. And so I think it's a little bit isolated from some of those things, but there's changes all the time. How do you decide at Namebase like what you're going to roll out, and how do you prioritize, and how quickly do you change the roadmap, in response to things happening on the ecosystem? Because you probably have to like scrap ideas and you have limited resources. Like what's that like? Has that evolved or just sticking to a roadmap?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's definitely something that is constantly evolving, and you're right, where the broader ecosystem changes so frequently that it can be very difficult to prioritize things. There are certain things like that make sense to bet on, though, that don't really change that much. So like something that we've been doing the past few months is we kind of realized a lot of the best users are there because they were the people that could like kind of like suffer through the entire onboarding and get through, and they're super committed and they got through to the end, and then they're now like Handshake experts, and then now they're like great users. But most users who are like interested in dabbling, it's like a super confusing process for them to get onboarded. The minting process is really confusing for new names, right? Since it's like an auction and it takes 2 weeks and they're snipers, it's like almost like a very hostile environment for new users. And on top of that, it's like very unintuitive to people, like what exactly is Handshake? Like, why is it valuable and all that stuff? So what we've focused on for the past few months is really just making it easier for new users to come on board, because we know that regardless of what we build on top of Handshake after this, as long as we have really good onboarding, whatever the use case it is that gets people excited, they'll be able to come on board and make use of that work that we're doing. So it's like basically betting on something that we are confident won't change, even as the specific opportunities change. But then past that, I think we're wrapping up that kind of like work stream now. So what will end up happening is we'll then look at the broader ecosystem and say, okay, like what's like the highest leverage thing? I think there's one consistent theme that isn't really changing, that I think is like pretty reasonable to bet on, which is what you're seeing in the decentralized web right now is there are a lot of dApps that have a lot of usage, but their front ends are completely centralized, and they're actually facing a lot of issues on those front ends, right? Like so many protocols now either restrict you based on your IP, or they block certain assets like Uniswap, or I think 1inch has some sort of like on-chain, like, agreeing to the terms of service or something like that. Now it's like, it's all like really weird, but it's like basically all of this enforcement is now moving to the front end, because that's the only point that's like centralized right now, right? So it's just like, you have a decentralized backend. All right, now we're going to centralize the front end. Now let's go after the front end. So this is a big issue, and it's something that can't really be solved when you're using centralized DNS, because at the end of the day, there's going to be an administrator who's running the uniswap.org domain name, right? Like they have it in Namecheap and they're editing the records. Maybe they're using a provider that has a team-based authentication scheme, so you can have like different team members with authority, but ultimately it's going to be in a centralized system, and that is a point of attack. And the only way you can solve that is with a decentralized DNS. So I think that this is a big issue that I'm seeing, that just isn't going to be like, even if the current trend in crypto changes, even if the the energy moves from Ethereum to like Solana or Terra or whatever, like they're all going to have these same issues. So when I think about like prioritizing, there are certain things that we could do. Like, for example, we could also do bridges from Handshake to Ethereum. So now people who are in Handshake land can do a lot more stuff in Ethereum, and vice versa, make it easier for the two communities to interact. I think that would actually be like a very high leverage thing for us to work on. But when I think about that prioritization, I'm like, okay, that's something that's like very high leverage that maybe we should work on right now. But there's another thing which is very high leverage that won't go away, even if the energy moves, even if the trends change. So that's kind of how I think about where to place our energies. Okay, are there certain things that we have higher confidence that it will have staying power, or have higher confidence that it's going to be worthwhile in the long term? And that's kind of how we would prioritize.
Yeah, I know that, and that makes sense. I mean, the order of operations makes sense, and I agree with you. I've noticed. I think I saw an exchange the other day that started using Handshake for their front end, and it's logical. The web, the deeper I get into Web3, I'm like, well, you need these components to start working together, and it seems like every day they're working together with less friction again, right? And they can interact. And that question also led me to like, is Ethereum maybe coming to Namebase? But I see how it's not priority number one. You essentially want to make it easier for users, right? And there's always, and it has a native currency. It's not an ERC20 token, right? It has its own Handshake coin. But in terms of early adoption, I think that's going to be big. I try to explain the auctions to people sometimes, and it's tough, right? They get excited. The game theory is super fun, but when you're new, you're like, okay, and when you shoot these bullets, right, you don't get them back in your chamber for like a couple weeks, right? So you have to kind of know like what. So it's tons of fun, but also, not something I would expect your common user who kind of just wants like a front end to have a D-Link, right? Like I end up making those for friends and stuff, but it is very user friendly for me to be able to use it. It's I think that alone kind of tells you, with the help of course Mike and Johnny's videos and everything you guys put out. So cool. Do you think that in the near future I would want, like, if I was, because I also think that when I'm like on the NFT world, people are, when they get excited about a project, that enthusiasm hits really quickly. And there is kind of a gap in terms of learning how to use Handshake, even acquiring the Handshake token where you can do it.
Right.
I don't know about a lot of decentralized exchanges where I can just go and acquire it. So would it be feasible to have users get excited, go to Namebase? I see like sometimes the sales for TLDs are now quoted in ETH. And just purchase something. Would Namebase be able to do that conversion on the back end? Is that like all that?
Yeah, 100%. There's definitely something that's on the roadmap, and it's something that the other thing in terms of prioritization is there's a matter of like the impact and the longevity of it, but then there's also a matter of just the effort involved, right? And like the speed of implementation. Because theoretically, if you have something that's like medium impact but like super quick to do, versus something that's like larger impact but takes longer to do, I think in most cases it makes sense to actually do that medium impact, very quick thing to do first. So in this case, I think bridging to Ethereum, that's something that I see a lot of potential behind, and it's definitely something that we're looking at heavily and investing into. I definitely see a world where it's like, you can like log into Namebase with your Ethereum wallet, and then you can go and bid on your names either with Ether or with wrapped HNS that you can get through like Uniswap or any other exchange. And then you can, bid on a name, and then you get like a wrapped handshake name. And then eventually you can go and use that handshake name either directly on Ethereum, or you can unwrap it into your Namebase account and, interact with your handshake name through that. Like those are all things that are possible and that we're like looking at very heavily. It'll happen incrementally, right? Because like that entire vision that I just painted, like that takes a lot of work to do. But there are like chunks of that we can implement immediately, basically, and kind of like go from there.
Cool. Okay. Well, I'm excited for it. So I'll definitely be sharing everything on Twitter as it comes. Another thing that when I try to kind of explain to new people what to do, their mind kind of immediately starts to swirl and they go, well, and they start jumping to a lot of reserved names. Like, what if I wanted to get like Apple, right? Because after they think about their name, and then on Namebase, you'll see reserved. And I know that I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole of, that the Alexa top 100,000 names, right? And you can go ahead and grab your name if you're the owner of one of those 100,000. What if I was a user, right, and I knew that my company, for example, could claim their name and I wanted them to do it? Can Namebase help me with that, other than showing me that name is reserved on the Alexa 100? Like, what would be the best way for me to do that?
Yeah. It's something that we've considered building like a tool around, actually, where we could potentially like help automate some of the steps. But I think the main thing now is it's basically you kind of need the company that has the name to manually update their DNS records and kind of like run through this process. It's something that we're happy to like at this point right now. Our position is we're happy to like help walk them through it, right, and like connect them with Johnny, and we'll see what we can do. But so far we haven't prioritized like creating some sort of tool around that. So I think the main thing that we can do right now that's actionable is either help support companies trying to claim the names with like identical support, or just kind of like walk them through it. Or we could help teach community members who are connected to these companies, oh, here are the steps that they need to do. It's like not that many steps. It's like fairly straightforward, but it's like, okay, we can actually like teach everyone how to do this. So then they can go to those companies and say, hey, if you want to do this, like, let me just like walk you through it. You'll get your name, you'll get some handshake coins out of it as well. And that can be like a nice scalable way of doing that. So I would say the immediate action item would just be to like reach out to Johnny and then kind of go from there.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. And I forget there's like 500 or so coins that you also would be claiming with the name, which is good.
Yeah.
Good to get the incentive going. Awesome. And all right. So we covered Ethereum here, I guess. Just again, and you can stop me or take it in a different direction, but just like kind of some random questions. The emoji TLDs are crazy. It's like it seems to be what gets the most attraction, which is cool and exciting, and I think they're fun. It's a nuance. Do you think this is just a trend? Do you really think that the brands are going to choose like representation, right? And like I have an Apple keyboard, right, where I can type in emojis, but do you really see that taking off? Do you think it's just like more of a collection fad, like with the NFT trend? What are your thoughts on that versus the actual names, being that it's very unique?
Yeah, I think with this kind of stuff, it's like super hard to predict the outcome. It's very, very, very challenging, but I think I see a world in which the emoji trend has staying power. If you look at the current like domain name world, it's like emoji domain names like are not really a thing, right? It's like that's not something that's like popular in the traditional domain name world. But then when you look in crypto, it's like, oh, like yachts are a thing, and emoji names on Handshake are a thing. So like, why do they develop? There's a speculative aspect around it, but I think there's also more utility around these names than you get in a traditional domain name. One of the examples is you can use your Handshake name to log into websites in a decentralized way. Right, and we have an example of this on Namer News. If you go to news.namebase.io, you can log in with your handshake name, you can log in with your emoji. And if you're using your name as a decentralized username, now an emoji name makes like a lot more sense. It's like a lot cooler in some ways to have like a neat emoji as your username than like an ASCII string. So I think that for those types of use cases, the emoji name actually makes a lot of sense. We're still very early into the development of those use cases, but I think given that potential, I think there's a high chance that the emoji names can have staying power.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that it's decentralized, it's global, what we were talking about earlier, and there is no barrier to understanding kind of what you're seeing there. It just, the more I was on Namebase, the more that I would just be looking at, like, it has, you feel an emotion rather than having to process a thought, right? And it's I think that it does have that staying power. And I think it's also, I think just the logging in to things like Neighbor News, that, like, that use case alone should be super exciting for some people. I know it is for me. I think that people don't really think through kind of what it is that gets them to log in with Google and things like that. But soon that login, like Neighbor News, is going to be huge. I think like communities kind of remaking Neighbor News as a login is going to be, of course, like exclusivity, early content, right? It's naturally going to progress in that direction. And yeah, why not have an emoji, right? That would be super fun. So, all right, cool. Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fan for sure, especially anything like with a flag. I'm like, that's cool if it's got, like, a country that I've been to or something. Cool. Well, what if there's a one project right now that's really keeping things interesting, probably a project that you're distanced from, right? That you're not really touching personally, that gets you excited about Handshake? Is it like there's like grassroots, like registrars getting open that are just kind of Web3, not like Namecheap, which is Web2 and Web3? Like, what is it that you see that's getting used that's just exciting, or you're like, I want to see where this goes, and maybe I can't even predict it, or you haven't thought of it?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing is I've been really impressed and pleasantly surprised with how many of these like domain registrars, like traditional domain registrars, are getting interested into Handshake. That level of industry adoption is something that is I was really surprised by, honestly. I was like, okay, these are like old, registrars that have been around for decades, like some of them literally decades, and it's like, how are they going to move quickly and kind of adopt this new technology? And then a lot of them, were basically like from day one, like in Circa and one domain, they got on board, I think within 6 months of Handshake's launch. We went through, we were working with Mike at Park.io, and we set up the registry system, and then they got on board, and then, the other registrars quickly followed. So I was like very impressed with the speed of their adoption. In terms of developments that I'm seeing that excite me, one thing that is happening a lot nowadays is, and this is something that's like pretty critical for Handshake adoption, is, a lot of these decentralized systems, they only make sense when you have centralized systems that aren't working, right? It's like, you only want to build a decentralized Twitter because Twitter like deplatforms developers, or you only want to build decentralized Facebook because Facebook deplatforms developers. You only want to build Bitcoin because of money printing. If these things weren't happening, then you wouldn't really need a point of these decentralized systems, because there's a lot of disadvantages that you get when you actually move things over to a distributed blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a big thing that you're seeing is there's a lot of issues happening around the centralized DNS, right? Like I mentioned earlier, you're seeing a lot of these dApps have to now self-regulate their own front ends, which is like a big issue. And then you're also seeing, recently you had the Facebook issue, which was it actually stemmed from DNS. It stemmed from DNS and caused an issue with BGP, and then made it so that people can resolve Facebook's DNS, which is, it's like kind of like a whole slew of issues with that architecture. But actually, if you had switched over to an architecture where you use a Handshake name as the root and you delegated to a second layer chain for the second level name, you actually could have had a system where it would have been very, very difficult for people to stop resolving the names, because they would be able to connect to the blockchain. As long as you can connect to the blockchain, you would be able to go and resolve the name. So basically, what I'm saying is, there are issues with dApps, there are issues with centralized DNS, even for Facebook and all these other big companies. And the only way that Handshake actually gets adopted and gets attention is when these issues persist and keep on happening. And our thesis from day one, literally since 2018, has been the internet is getting increasingly consolidated. We're seeing more and more issues around that come up. It's also getting increasingly regulated. Again, we're going to see a lot more issues come up. And as these systemic shocks happen to the system, that's when people are going to get really, really interested in these decentralized systems. And so they're naturally going to get interested in decentralized DNS as well, because that's a critical component of any application. So
yeah,
that occurring is really just proving out our thesis. And to me, it just shows it's a matter of time until there's a lot more attention around Handshake and a lot more interest in adoption. And I think once you have a lot of that zeitgeist occur, that's when you get some really incredible applications that will come out, and really incredible adoption. Because when the world's attention starts focusing on any specific technology, things can happen very, very quickly. You're starting to see that now a lot with like NFTs, right? It's like first it was like, if you look at OpenSea, it was like basically doing no volume at all for like 3.5 years. And then starting in 2020, it was like 3000x growth. And then now you're seeing like big brands and influencers and everyone else. And now like Coinbase and everyone, like, not, and Coinbase isn't even like the big news, right? You have like Jay-Z and all these other people, they're like getting super, super into it. So when the world starts like focusing on something, things can happen really quickly. And I'm starting to see the early innings of that happening around, DNS. And so that to me is something that is while unfortunate for the centralized systems, it is something that excites me a lot about Handshake, because it'll just pull everyone towards the decentralized system.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. That's what gets me excited about Handshake. I'm excited about it because my dad is a ham radio enthusiast. I literally grew up with antennas on my roof so that he could connect with Argentina and Spain, and he would set up hubs so that they could interconnect. Bananas. So I got excited about it, but I get in arguments with my crypto friends, right, about why am I so excited about Handshake? I'm like, look at the current events. They constantly are building, right, a demand for something it's not going anywhere. CryptoKitties was what taught me that. Because I went down, got into crypto, kind of moved, traveled, forgot all about it, and then I remember CryptoKitties resurfacing. I'm like, this is still alive, and that's when I realized, yeah, this is not going anywhere. The world around us is going to evolve, and it seems to really the momentum is obviously building. And with Handshake in particular, the implementation, once you decide to implement it, isn't that crazy, right? Especially for the people that are looking for it, right? They're going to be like, okay, this is something I can and I can set up the rest of the Web3 stack if I want to, or adopt it later. But a front end is something I can solve. And so I see that, yeah, it's going to be around, and the events that are happening in the world keep gravitating towards it. But you're also seeing an ownership. People are caring more about owning things. Like I remember when I had CDs, right? Like that was my CD case. That was important. And then I had my iPod, like don't mess with it. And now it's like half your existence is online. And it seems like the rules of engagement constantly are getting changed on you depending on what platform you chose. And people are getting over that, and they don't want to be building the foundations of their business, right? Or their infrastructure on something that they don't control. And so it's, for some reason or another, as a user or as, a company that hosts infrastructure, you're just going to want to control something if it's this easy, right, in the grand scheme. So I agree that it's more what happens on the outside that's stimulating the growth, because there's a lot to be done. But once that momentum builds, it's going to be parabolic, which will be interesting. Cool. Well, I have just two more quick questions. They're going to be like random out there, so just whatever you think. But like Handshake is a proof of work blockchain. You're seeing less and less of them. I think people don't even realize how few blockchains are proof of work. And there's cool little miners out there you can get. Would you like, I think like educational, right? Like in school, they used to show us like, kind of out there text, you'd have a teacher and that's what you would do, take a semester on. I see blockchain being that. Do you think like that people will have a miner like in their home? Do you think that that's even like realistic? Have you seen anybody do it, or any suggestions on how to do it if you wanted to get into it like as a hobby?
Yeah. My take on this is, one is I'm pretty removed from mining, so I'm not very involved in that. I'm not very knowledgeable in that. So like take everything that I say with a grain of salt. My sense is for all these things, if you look at a lot of like marketplaces, and like mining is kind of like a marketplace for like energy usage. You're like, you're spending your own electricity, and you're getting something in return, right? It's like if you're an Uber driver, you're like driving your own car and you're like getting something in return. If you're like an Etsy seller, you're like making something and you like get something in return. And people are like buying your product. In this case, with Bitcoin, it's like people are like buying your energy in a way. And typically what happens with these kinds of marketplaces is initially it might start with like amateurs, people who are just doing it on the side. I think if you've been around, like everyone remembers from like, 5 years ago, people being like, oh yeah, like I used to mine Bitcoin in my dorm room to pay rent or something like that, right? You got a lot of people who are doing stuff like that. And then it basically got more and more expensive, where it's like now you only see professional miners, right? They're like companies that will go and like do a deal with a local government, and they get some like really cheap resource for energy, and they're able to use that to like mine Bitcoin profitably. But I think that the trend that you see in all of these like markets is that the initial people doing it are amateurs, because they're just like it's like not that hard and they can get some like side money. But then as they become more and more popular, that population actually professionalizes. So like now you have like professional Uber drivers, you have professional Etsy sellers, you have professional Airbnb hosts, right? It used to be a hobby thing. And now it's like people who are doing it are like, oh, I have like 10 different Airbnbs and they do it as like a legit business. Yeah. And I think you're seeing the same thing in mining where it's like, okay, initially they're hobby enthusiasts. Now you have like professional miners and they're doing like all these arbitrages. They're like making deals with the governments. It's like a legit thing where, and like you can still run your miner if you want in your home, but like you're doing that as like a fun gimmick almost rather than like as a serious side business. I think the same thing with Handshake. It's, you can get a device that lets you mine in your home, and maybe right now it might actually even be profitable to do that. But as these markets grow, it's going to professionalize. And I think that's just like the common thread that you see across all of these.
Yeah, no, of course, definitely. Yeah, it gets highly competitive for sure. I think and I mean, as a common user myself, if maybe I would have gone through the effort of kind of learning that as a novice, but now with the whole world of DeFi and staking and all liquidity and things like that, you can kind of realize you can kind of see play with blockchains, I guess, for lack of better words, with less barrier to entry and less concerns with energy. But yeah, government subsidies for energy is something that's really interesting. Coming from South America, living there, you can get government. It's interesting how quickly governments can be dynamic when it comes to things like energy if their natural resources play that way. And I have a friend of my dad's. He's probably in his 60s or 70s who called me the other day. He's like, I heard you know about crypto. I want to learn how to mine. I was like, I don't even know, but sure. But he wants to do it for real because of the power of the dollar. So cool. Well, that's it on Handshake. I just have to know, Tieshun, you have getting in your head, what is it that's not Handshake related, that's not Namebase related? I know I saw you posting some stuff about Solana. What's blowing your mind? What are you super excited about? Is like governance stuff?
I think the big thing that's super exciting is when I look at like technologies like Ethereum and Solana, and again, like you also see like Saya and Arweave. They all are, it's all like pretty much Handshake related and then at the end of the day for me. So these technologies all fit into the dWeb thesis that I have, which is that you can actually compose them in a way to actually build very, very rich applications that are just like not possible today. And currently you don't really see a lot of interoperability. You see a little bit like, we have, of course, like our D-Links, which uses Saya. And then you have on Ethereum, a lot of NFTs are using IPFS. And then on Solana, a lot of their NFTs are using Arweave. It seems like kind of arbitrary, like which technology a system ends up using. But I think what you'll end up seeing in the future is that people are actually using, Handshake, like plus Solana, plus Arweave all together to create a decentralized application that is like literally not possible today, that incorporates like decentralized authentication, that maybe uses like Solana for the point system, that maybe uses Arweave for the storage. I think that the thing that I'm most excited about is as these technologies get developed, you can just compose them in a way to like build really, really cool decentralized applications. Because Handshake would be a lot more boring if all we had was Handshake and our only initiative was, okay, let's just replace centralized DNS with decentralized DNS. And we're still going to have servers behind the scenes, on AWS or on Google Cloud. But it's just going to be like the decentralized DNS version of that. Like that's like, that is like a better world than the world that we currently live in, right? It's like more secure. You can have decentralized certificate authorities and you have much less DNS censorship. So it's like, yeah, like that is better. But I think that that's not like a step function improvement in terms of like what kind of applications you can build. When I think about pairing Handshake with something like Saya or Ethereum, that becomes a lot more exciting to me because, Solana or Ethereum, that becomes a lot more exciting to me because you can actually build applications that are really just like not possible to build today. So that's what's exciting to me. Those developments, all part of the dWeb trend that I see kind of like rising organically. All these technologies are kind of becoming very usable around the same time, which I think is just like a very, very exciting breeding ground for something that can be super awesome that can come out of that.
Yeah. I wish I could have tried to envision this like in 2017 to think, interoperability is going to change a lot of things. And I think just because it's user friendly, I've gotten very into like the Cosmos chain and like the interacting, like now I'm on one chain, now I'm on an entire different one. And it's just, it's going to be really exciting once you can just plug these things into each other for for sure. I think for tons of reasons. I plan to keep following it, kind of trying to make some tools for people. I'll make some when I release this, I'll try to make some videos on Namebase, just some summaries. Maybe my friends will set up their own D-links instead of me doing it for them. Yeah. Well, cool, Tieshun. I appreciate your time, man. I'll update you when things are ready. But I mean, that's kind of it for my questions. I look forward to to seeing developments, and if you ever need anything, let me know. Yeah, that's all I got.
Awesome. Great. All right. Thanks for doing this. And yeah, let me know once you release it. We'll definitely share it out. Super glad that you're part of the community. Excited to build together.
Awesome. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Let me know in the comments what else you want to see. I'd like to make some videos on Namebase, trying to make some things that are interesting, but any ideas that you'd like to throw out would be great. All right. Well, see you next time. Bye.